Today we're going to be looking at 5 dynasty trades that you could make in your fantasy leagues. We're covering 5 players. We're looking at the market. We're looking at the player values and see whether or not you want to buy, sell, or trade the player in your league. Or maybe it's not possible, but we're going to look at the market and see what we can do with these players. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're helping you build your dynasty teams. We're looking at trades. We're looking at player values. We're definitely looking at the rookie drafts and the players and prospecting out and doing rookie profiles. It's all right here, one-stop shop. Click that button, stop missing out. But we're going to start off with our first player today. And this player is piggybacking off of last week, off of one of the other players. In the video, I mentioned that I wanted to look at him. I wanted to look at the market. I want to pontificate about him and everything else. Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is a hot name on this channel. When he was a rookie, we talked about him a lot. Kyren Williams, last season, we talked about him a lot in his workload. He was getting a lot of touches, a lot of opportunities, and he was very productive. An RB1 most of the season, if not an RB2, only 2 down games, and that's a 10.5 game, and that's an 8.6 game, 17.4 points per game. He was an RB1 this year for sure. He's ranked as an RB8 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. He's up there in ADP, keep trade cut. He's up there in value. Some people like it, some people don't, but production is production, and it really depends on how you value running backs and how you strategize around running backs. Some people look at running back position as a redraft asset that's short term. Some people try to build longer with them. It's really depending on how you want to build around the running back position. And honestly, I think all the strategies work, but you really have to figure out what you want to do, stick with it, have a game plan and blueprint, and roll with that. Kyren Williams is getting touches. This team loves him, and they're going to continue to give him touches. 22.2 opportunities per game, one of the top running backs in the National Football League when it comes to opportunities. There were games where he was getting 30-plus opportunities. He was usually, on average, getting 20-plus. He was running a lot of routes. He was getting a lot of pass-blocking snaps as well. One of the top running backs, if not the top running back in the league when it comes to pass-blocking snaps. He was always on the field. He never came off the field. This equated to a lot of production. On top of that, he's damn good. He's a damn good running back prospect. He's very efficient. He's a lunch pail running back. He's good at all phases. Kyren Williams is deserving the market at where he's at when we're looking at recent productivity. However, do you want to pay that? Do you want to have that? Do you want to pay that with ADP when you're drafting in a startup draft? Do you want to trade for that at cost? Do you want to do that? Or do you see the value up there and you're like seeing all these touches and you want to sell out? Let me know what you want to do in the comments below. I think you can do this in a number of different ways. I think we're at that point where you're thinking about that, 24.4 years old. Maybe you want to be out a year or two early before it starts getting rough, or maybe you want to enjoy the production. I can definitely see it in both standpoints right there, and I definitely see a lot of people doing both strategies with this player. And when I look at him, we're number 1 among running backs when it comes to snap share, almost 90%. Blake Corum did not get a chance to breathe on the field. He didn't get the chance to look at the grass. Opportunity share, second in the league, 83.7%. Most of the year he was at number 1. Routes ran, we were up there. Remember, we did not play that final week of the season, but routes ran, I think that's low. It was higher than that because we covered Kyren Williams about every week. When the waiver wire was dry and there was nobody to talk about, we talked about Kyren Williams, we talked about stash plays, running backs to stash, stashing Blake Corum if you have Kyren Williams just in case when you get deeper into the season. We were looking at all these touches that could potentially go to Blake Corum, and that could potentially go to Blake Corum if something does happen to Kyren Williams next year. That's something to pay attention to. We're getting a lot of touches and opportunities. That just does not come around in fantasy football too easily for a running back. Even if you get that for 1 year or 2 more years or 3, you can still win some championships with that. If you're not in a position to win a championship over the next few seasons, then you may want to look to sell on the high and see what you can get. If you're not in that position, like if there's no chance, you're looking at your roster, I'm decimated. I got Kyren Williams though. He's been on my roster. He's been scoring. If you got him, you should be at least mid-level in your league unless you've really been hurting pretty badly. You did not know what to do with him, and then he blasts off. He's been pretty solid this year. I think that's an understatement, though. The workload is immense. This team loves him. The Rams love him. he's going to get that contract. He's going to be a Ram forever. Sean McVay loves Kyren Williams more than he loves his wife. He loves his wife. He'll go to the media and say, hey, we got to distribute the touches among these running backs better. We got to share the touches. Next week, 30-plus opportunities. We saw that not last year, but the year before when he was hurt. They're bringing in all these running backs. He was saying it left and right. Then those running backs did not do what he wanted to do. Kyren Williams, more touches, more touches, more touches. And there will be more touches for Kyren Williams until his face falls off. And when that face falls off, then you'll see Blake Corum. So in the short term, to maybe even long term, longer than expected, Kyren Williams is going to get work. However, an injury hits, Blake Corum's going to step in there, and that could muddy the waters a little bit. When you're looking at value, where he's at, it's him versus other running backs. And these other running backs are kind of in similar situations where they're getting a lot of work. They're getting a lot of opportunity. I would definitely take him over at Josh Jacobs. Him and Jonathan Taylor are very interesting prospects. They're kind of in a similar career arc. Taylor's more explosive, but Kyren Williams is never coming off the field, and he's always in those goal line opportunities. Breece Hall, electric, especially when healthy and when the Jets are cooking. When you're looking at other adjacent options here, Joe Burrow and 2QB T. Higgins. You're picking your poison here, and it really depends on how you want to build your team, but there's some options if you're looking to get outs. Right now, he's holding pretty steady. I look for him to stay steady throughout the offseason. They just spent a third-round pick on Blake Corum. I don't see them going too crazy at running back. If one falls to him on day 3, and I'm talking like 5th, 6th, 7th, or UDFA, that's pretty studly, and that could happen. That might add some competition to the offense, and we're going to see that with every running back in the National Football League. Maybe not Bijan, maybe not Jahmyr Gibbs type talents, but that's a probability for every running back. A UDFA coming in and maybe playing better than expected, and maybe 2 years down the line, they start siphoning a little bit of work or something like that. There's a deep running back class that can really make an impact to some of these veterans. I just don't look for that to happen because they already made a move at running back. However, when he was out 2 years ago, Sean McVay's head was spinning. It was spinning hard, so maybe he wants a tandem if something does happen to Kyren Williams. Maybe he does, but I don't look for that to happen. They got to be a little bit more frugal with their picks. But speaking frugality, if that's a word, I might have made that up, that if a running back falls to him, position wells are dried up, it's 6th round. 6th round talent in this year's draft is comparable to probably like a 4th round talent in another draft. That could potentially happen. And next thing you know, you got Blake Corum and another running back behind him. He gets banged up, and things could get rather interesting in this backfield long term. Tony Pollard, I wanted to look at him. He's got an interesting contract here with the Tennessee Titans. We know he's not forever there, and we know he's not a forever running back. But look at where he's at in terms of ranking. ADP's a little bit higher at DLF, but look at the production. Steady RB2. He's a steady RB2 with 2 RB1 weeks. I do not know how he finished and placed right before he got injured, but 12.8 points per game. Steady RB2, usable most weeks. Usable, I will say, about 75% of the time in your lineup. Good to go, and is cheap, but more for a win-now team, obviously. If I'm rebuilding, retooling, he's got to be out, but that should have been during the season. We should not be in the springtime trying to figure out what to do with Tony Pollard because that's too late. Right now, we're seeing him with the Titans. This is a very volatile team. We do not know what they're going to be looking like at quarterback next year, and we do not have many more years on the contract. And this running back well at the NFL is getting deep with talents. So Tony Pollard's going to have a lot of competition wherever he goes because there's going to be competition in the National Football League. And that being said, Tony Pollard, good for the now, it looks like. I expect this year, if we're still in the Titans, it looks like it should be. The contract looks a little funky on Spot Track. Should be being productive. Should be getting you similar to this. I don't see it being that hard for him giving you week in, high-end RB2 production. That's what he did. Maybe some low-point weeks if we can't move the ball enough. And that's not on him. That's on the team. RB30 for short-term production. If you're playing redrafters or running backs, sure, if you can get it on the cheap. Opportunity share was in the top 10. Snap share was in the top 10. 36 red zone touches on the season. very low, but it is on the Titans. 57 targets, 10th among running backs, over 1,000 yards. You can't really ask for more, especially in a situation. Ran a good bit of routes, good route participation rate for a running back. Everything's checking out for him. True yards per carry is pretty solid at 4.2. A little bit on the low end, actually, but still, considering what we were working with, it's not like the quarterback's going to scare them from being out of the box. That being said, Tony Pollard, RB30, fair price tag that you can get production on the cheap if you're looking for a productive running back in Dynasty right now if you're a win-now team. Adjacent players, Tank Bigsby, Jonathan Brooks, Tajay Spears, Tank Dell, Najee Harris, Tank Bigsby, DeAndre Swift, Braylon Allen. That's what you're seeing adjacent-wise. Some of those players you're going to have to get creative with. That is not a one-for-one scenario or a concrete baseline pricing or what they're worth actually in leagues. But starting points, something to chew on when you're looking at this. And I mentioned the contract earlier. Down there it is. And it gets a little bit interesting here how long we are going to be with the Titans. We should be there in 2025. Potential out afterwards. How long? It's not for long for sure due to age and due to the competition factor, free agency, draft when it comes to running back position, how you moneyball the position. Looks like you got some time with him. Looks like he's going to be liquid on the cheap. Might be a running back you may want to pay attention to prior to the draft. Maybe during your rookie draft if they bring somebody in. If they bring in more competition, it's going to be hard for some of these teams not to draft some of these running backs, even though they got two good running backs on the roster. Some of these running backs are going to come at value at them. There's too many good running backs in this draft. You got about 20 of them that can go anywhere, and that's going to be making some of these backfields interesting for the long term because some of these later round running backs who got a lot of talent are going to be there, RB3, sitting there for a bit, waiting for their moment. Tony Pollard's not going to get zapped instantly by that because I don't look for them to pick up a running back early. That being said, short term, could be a cheap buy. Maybe not as liquid as you think, but could be more liquid than what you think as well due to him not being a long-term asset. Kyle Pitts. We're looking at the market here. Valued as tight end 4 mid-season. Now we're around tight end 10 range. And the market does not know what they want to do with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is an interesting fantasy asset. He can be productive, and he can be nothing. That is Kyle Pitts. He's barely usable in fantasy, but when he is, he's immense. He had one blow-up week, and that was in Week 8 against Tampa Bay. That was a night game. And then also we got that Seattle game, that Tampa Bay game, where we scored. Tampa Bay, those were always interesting matchups with the Falcons last year. One good game against Washington. And a game where we barely hit tight end 1 status. Week 1 against Pittsburgh. And that was during a time where most of the tight ends were not productive the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. Low volume and scoring fantasy-wise at the tight end spot, if you remember that. We were getting tight ends, top 8 in fantasy, scoring less than 10 fantasy points PPR. That being said, when you're looking at the targets, we can get about 5 a game here, 4.3 on the season, but we can rack them up in spurts. So that's something you really don't want to rely on if you're paying up for, but you're not paying up for anymore at tight end 10. Target share at 13.7%. That is a major problem. That is a major problem. His ADOT is actually pretty good for a tight end. Usually around the 6 to 7 range in ADOT at tight end. Honestly, tight ends are pretty much big Wan'Dale Robinsons, soaking up short targets, and you want one getting a lot of targets in red zone looks. We're not getting a lot of targets. We're honestly not. 4.4 a game, 13.7% target share. Drake London eating targets. Bijan Robinson eating targets. Darnell Mooney eating targets. Ray McLeod having good games. It's hard to get the targets racked up at the tight end spot when you're good at the wide receiver position, when it's more efficient to throw that way. On top of that, target separation, 34th among tight ends. Route participation rate was okay, but it's 19th among tight ends as well. Air yards on the season, 10th among tight ends, but the target share was low. ADOT was okay. With that target share being so low, I would like a higher ADOT. I would like that pushing double digits. I would like it to be the 11, 12 range, actually. for him to be more of a high-end volatile option and hit that top end a little bit more, considering we're only getting a few targets a game. I look for this to be the same. I don't look for this to change much. I would see schematic-wise in game where we might have a few more splash games, but he's a roller coaster player, a roller coaster tight end, and that is a player you got to decide whether or not you want to pay for. Maybe later on down the road, our contract ends, which looks like it's going to happen. They may have to make a choice with Kyle Pitts. Might get traded, might not. I've been hearing trade rumors, but those are more like social media, like makeup stories. I just want to wait and see what happens. But realm possibility, this is an offseason where anything can happen. He's got some trade value with some teams because he's a highly athletic tight end prospect. Tight end value, he's got some name cachet. He's got some pop weeks. We're staying in the same situation. He's going to be volatile up and down, more than likely, unless something changes over the course of the offseason, we get better, which we're not going to really know. I do the camp highlights, but we're really not going to know. It's always hearsay as we go in. Kyle Pitts, right now, unless something drastically changes, and I think a new team with a quarterback that loves to target the tight end, and we still roll that way once we get in season and we get developed with the new team, is probably going to be a roller coaster player as long as there's competition in the offense. Here, there's too much competition. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and then the wide receiver 2 and 3 is getting a lot of work. That being said, roller coaster tight end 10 spot, roughly ADP value, and you're going to have to roll with that. Jordan Whittington, we're looking at him again. I looked at him in the stash video last week, but with Jordan Whittington, Cooper Kupp, likely to get traded. I say likely, more than likely it's probably going to happen depending on price, negotiations, and everything else. I was wanting to look at his value. I was very intrigued with that. Likely to play in the slot. Huge injury history. The one thing about him, and I think the market's saying this by not popping up really quick after that news, is that we got a lot of Cooper Kupp type wide receivers in this year's draft. We got a few of them. Rams could definitely go that way, get themselves a good route runner, create competition in this offense, let things play out in training camp. We got some guys in the later rounds that are sleepers that could be immense additions to this team. That could be competition for Jordan Whittington. The injury history is huge. We saw that throughout his collegiate career. We saw it last year. He can rack up targets. He could definitely do that. However, we are looking at a guy that is favored by Sean McVay. And the reason why I want to look at him, because I knew he had that Sean McVay privilege going into the season from training camp, from the buzz. Kyren Williams got that. And I do not know if that's going to be a thing where if you get Sean McVay privilege, it's almost a guarantee. So I'm watching Jordan Whittington closely if we can get that Kyren Williams run. I'm not banking on it, though. I think the injury history, I think competition being brought in might impact him immensely, but he could be out on the field. What I like about him is that he's wide receiver 78 in value. The market did not shoot up on him, and this is what you want to do as a stash play. I look at him as a stash play. There's like 100 stash players I could look at. Most stash plays won't hit. Most stash plays won't amount to anything. I think Jordan Whittington might be looking at a scenario where he might see some added opportunity going into year 2. Another thing, you're going into year 2, there's more volatility for improvement for your production and being on the field compared to some of the other players. Like, it shouldn't be 1-for-1 to Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, Tyler Johnson, considering he's the new blood. We still got to see more out of that. But I think more new blood's going to be brought in as well when I look at Jordan Whittington. When I look at adjacent players here and pontificate what I'm looking at here, honestly, same thing as what I said, stash player. Stash player versus stash players. Pick your poison, get what you want. Elijah Moore is very enticing. He's very enticing. He's going to hit the open market, and he's a very good prospect. He's a better prospect than Jordan Whittington. He's always been helpful for his team wherever he's been at. Elijah Moore could be an interesting scenario here as a stash play because he could be seeing the field early. May not be productive, but could give you wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 results that you could use in a pinch when needed. Xavier Legette, first round wide receiver, tremendous size-adjusted athleticism. We popped a little bit. We flashed a little bit. One thing I can say is the market did not take a dump on him. We're hovering around wide receiver 42 value, so he's at least a hold right now. If you see the chart on a rookie after their rookie season, do this in this ADP, anywhere you see it, then you have to have some concern. It's flat right now, and that means he's at least a hold at wide receiver 42, back end of your roster wide receiver that you hope pops. I do not want to rely on him in my lineups right now, but he's a guy that you're hoping that pops. That's relatively cheap. That might get a little bit cheaper come rookie draft time, especially when we get the running backs infused into the rankings and player pool. More people start looking at that. On top of that, I can definitely see where there's room for growth. He's a developmental wide receiver still. We still need to get more polished. There are some games, though, we're racking up the targets. 5.1 targets per game, more than Kyle Pitts. Faster than Kyle Pitts. And I'm just saying that due to the video, as we just mentioned him. But a good amount of targets per game. Some upside to that if we can develop. Bryce Young was looking good last year, especially in back end of the season. 17% target share, 8 out of 12.3. That target share needs to ramp up to plus 20%. That definitely needs to happen for him to be a consistent asset. So we're about 3 to 5 percentage points away for that, for him to be more consistent. The ADOT's there. We got that speed. On top of that, we get the shorter targets too. We get the goal line looks, those red zone looks due to the size and speed, trying to get those mismatches. 84 targets during his rookie season. 5.3 targets per game. Solid. 407 routes ran. 25 routes ran per game. That's pretty good for a rookie. A decent route participation rate at 73%. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. I wouldn't be surprised if he has some boom seasons here and there, or give you some splash games here and there throughout his career. I think if we hold true to this, and he stayed on the field, he kept getting opportunities. There were injuries in the offense and trades and stuff. Leggett had 497 receiving yards, led the team in targets, however played the most games. David Moore got some opportunity in there. Deontay Johnson got shipped off. Jalen Coker is the discount play. He's ranked 70 to 80 range in value. I look at it in ranges, not tit for tat, 1 for 1. Xavier Leggett, 40 to 50 range in value. 35 to 50 maybe, depending on your league structure and how guys like to grip onto their young players that they just drafted. Xavier Leggett, you buying? You holding? Or are you trying to sell? I don't look at this as a time to sell unless you're trying to make a move for something you want, because we're kind of just flatline. We're kind of middle of the road in value. It's not like we popped or peaked or anything like that. According to the numbers, we're kind of priced appropriately, so it's really depending on what you want to do. We are going into year 2. We could have a pivotal road here. We got a fork in the road where we could go one way or the other. Bryce Young continues to develop. He develops, and maybe we get to like a 22% target share while maintaining this ADOT. We have the same catch rate and everything else. That could allow him to be a little bit better for you in fantasy, maybe more usable in your lineups, maybe more trustworthy in your lineups, and something to look at. And Xavier Leggett does have some upside. Looking at his adjacent players, and again, these are all volatile wide receivers. Tank Dell with the injury, Michael Pittman, his situation, Cortland Sutton, older wide receiver prospect, Ricky Pearsall. He had some flashes, but a very anticlimactic season during his rookie year. Jacoby Myers, older Raiders. Devontae Adams, twilight of his career. Najee Harris, hitting free agency with a stacked running back class. J.K. Dobbins, can we stay healthy for another season? I don't know about that. So it's him versus questionable players. And that's what you're looking at, 1 for 1. And you're going to have to get creative with that, like I said, because this isn't listed in concrete when it comes to pure value. This isn't the value when it comes to trades. We all know this. But it's a starting point for your creativity for your trade. Those are 5 dynasty trades we're looking to make today. Let me know who you're trying to deal today. I want to hear about it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.